Okay, at the start I said that you shouldn't assume that historical figures such as Sun-Tzu, Thucydides, Machiavelli and Hobbes were realists. Why not? Well, the first reason for saying this is that realism as an international relations concept didn't really emerge until after the First World War. The furthest back that we can really push it is to 1853, with Ludwig von Hochau's coining of the term realpolitik. But that's a slightly different beast, and it isn't really referring to relations between states. In any event, Sun Tzu, Thucydides, Machiavelli and Hobbes were long dead before realism emerged. But another reason to not assume that they were realists is that to call them such is enormously selective cherry-picking. Some authors use Sun Tzu to argue that morals are not much use to political leaders. Rulers instead should use power to advance their interests. While it's true that Sun Tzu does look at power, to say that he doesn't think morals are much use is to demonstrate ignorance of his work. The point he makes that captured soldiers should be kindly treated and kept is certainly moral and more in line with the liberalism that we'll be looking at in the next session. Indeed, a case could be made that this is the first written foundation for the Geneva Conventions. The same's true for Thucydides. If you go looking for evidence of realism of the work in Thucydides, you will find it. One of the most famous bits of the Malayan dialogue seems to underpin realism. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. But that doesn't make Thucydides a realist. As Hoffman pointed out, to be sure, we can all trace our ancestry back to Thucydides, but Thucydides was a historian. Schmidt makes a similar argument. It is a fundamental misconception to presume that the work of classical political theorists such as Thucydides can be construed as constitutive antecedents of the literature of contemporary IR. Slightly fancier language there, but the same meaning. To assume that those classical authors were realists is to just focus on the bits of their work that matches a realist narrative and to ignore the bits that don't. Again, for Machiavelli, his observations may at first glance seem to be natural realism, but when we look a little more closely, things aren't so simple. He states that of mankind we may say in general they are fickle, hypocritical and greedy of gain. Well, that negative view of human nature is very interesting, but what relevance does it have for international politics? If realists are willing to accept the unitary rational assumption, then none. States will calculate their interests and act accordingly. Ascribing a negative view of human behaviour onto them is not helpful. Similarly, when Machiavelli says that there is no avoiding war, it can only be postponed to the advantage of others. Not only is he contradicting Sun Tzu, who goes to great lengths to explain when and when not to fight, his words are once again incompatible with the unitary rational actor assumption. If it is not rational for a state to go to war, then it will not do so. Finally, when he says that politics have no relations to morals, well, this may fit in well with the overall world view of some realists, and it doesn't directly contradict anything inherent to realism, but it's certainly disagreed with by some other schools, such as liberalism, which we'll be looking at in the next session.